Hey, so what are your thoughts on eating bugs? Today we're talking all things agriculture, food and beverages and some of the issues that are currently in vogue. I'm John Harris and welcome to another episode of Exponential Radio. Look, by 2050 they're expecting the population to be 9.5 billion. And with that we got our first issue. We're going to look at food systems. So we're going to have to double our production in order to feed that many people. And one of the steps is obviously to interconnect all the systems, the digital systems, etc., to make things more efficient on a global scale. We need effective coordination of those systems amongst the major stakeholders. And obviously that includes supply chain and smoothing our supply chain. We've spoken about this as far as legislation is concerned in different regions and how difficult that all is and complex. And we need to also understand we need systems that have a buffer to handle shocks. So on a global scale. So this is something that's very important. The next issue I want to chat about is empowered consumers. So the consumer with technology is becoming more empowered. That is for certain. And that means that they can compare prices, they can make informed decisions, they can look at traceable processes to make sure that the foods are derived through ethical means. They're looking at the labeling. And again, these we've spoken about is complex when you look at it on a global scale because of the different legislation in different areas of Earth. The next thing is information on the ingredients, which is important, although it is also a tricky issue, again, because of legislation, and I know many of the health products don't have to comply with the same amount of regulatory environment as normal foods. Next issue I want to chat about is food security. This is pretty important because these shocks create price hikes and dips, which makes it difficult for the retailers, and obviously that's passed on a lot of times to the consumers. That also isn't a great thing for a huge expanding middle class globally. We talk about the planet getting wealthier. I'm not so sure about that rabbit hole, but there is a bigger middle class developing worldwide. These shocks we talk about are things in the security like Russia, Ukraine, which is a breadbasket, which is a big issue. There are other conflicts that are less of an issue as far as wars are concerned, but climate as well. Although I'm not an advocate of pure absolute climate change, I do know that we obviously have cycles, El Nino, etc., that do have impacts in different regions, and certain regions are getting drier, although that sometimes turns around and then gets wetter. So maybe the word would be a bit more volatile in the particular cycle that we're in. Next, these fuel price hikes are a big issue, and we'll talk about that just now a little bit more. Obviously, as far as inputs are concerned, fertilizers, etc., these increase. This pushes up the price for the farmer, which pushes up distribution, and it's a never-ending chain. Always the cost going on to the consumer at the end of the day, which is starting to limit some people's ability to buy the kind of quality foods that they would like to, especially the less fortunate. There's apparently about 276 million people that are malnourished on the planet at the moment, and this is something that people are looking to reduce. And again, we're going to need, with the pressure increase of population, it's going to make it doubly hard to do so. So that food insecurity then is passed on unless certain actions are taken place or put into action. Consumption and sustainability. Look, sustainable choices. For the consumer, they have that option, and people are making more sustainable choices. And obviously, these are the more affluent areas. I see that in some of the other areas where people are moving into the middle class, they are less inclined to look at these sustainable choices as going to the opportunity to actually have food that they prefer. Asia and obviously China, India are a classical thing where their middle class is increasing exponentially, and that's pushing up, a huge pressure on the types of food that needs to be produced through the retailers. So those price restraints, when it comes to looking at green products and how we're going to cope with this, a lot of the problems with a lot of the green products are they're more expensive to produce, and people then would go to some of their preferred foods and some perhaps the cheaper priced foods. So, products with the cause is also very popular. We're talking mostly in the more first class economies where people are looking at causes, more interested, especially the Z-Geners prefer things with, in all of their life, they're looking at things as being more important as having something valuable to contribute to the planet. So these kind of things are happening, and the education system is part of that. Some of it good, some of it bad. Next is a sustainable resources. So again, we're looking at increased demand, and that being affected by climate. Not necessarily, I'm not per se on the massive climate change they're talking about. I think that this is incremental, and at the moment we have a lot of seasons. There are obviously, if you go back in time, looking at the time span, this goes back depending what period you're looking at. You can say it's warmer now than it was 2 years ago, or whatever your time scale is, but if you go back hundreds of thousands or a million years, then you start to get all sorts of different information. So I do think there is warmer seasons, drier seasons, wetter seasons, etc. Maybe the climate is a little bit more volatile. I'm not sure. Energy and greenhouse gases is a big issue when you talk about resources. Looking at how you can utilize aggregate to its best effect. And in here we're looking at packaging and plastics. These are all things that we need to think about because they are causing pollution and problems as well. So fish farming is maybe one of the resources you look at, vertical farming, but unfortunately these are all more costly. And so your normal type of agriculture, which is more efficient as far as prices consumed, not necessarily as production, but currently is more popular as far as pricing, these tend to put a spanner in the works, and I'm worried that they're going to try and push up the price with fuel, etc., to the normal fossil fuel, to the normal type of agriculture, in order to make these other things feasible, which will not be good in the short term, medium term for the general population, because they'll make it very unaffordable again. Health and wellness, these are things that we need to look at. The private sector is very involved in health and wellness. These products do contribute to some of the trace elements and vitamins, etc., that may be shortfall within people's normal diet, vitamin D being a big one, especially as you get older. So there's a lot of good stuff there. Again, these are affected in conflict zones, and we need to look at the excessive weight as being a real issue, because the next thing is junk food. And if you look at some photos which I was doing the other day of the 70s people on the beach, there weren't so many fat people on the beach. If you look at it now, let's use the word obese, and you'll see a lot more obese people on the beach. And a lot of that is to do with diet. So a lot of new products are going to come out when they become more scalable, and AI will start to play a part in that, as we know. I'm not sure when people are ready for protein that's created artificially, and as I mentioned, the bug story. So some of these things, I don't know how popular that's going to be and what time frame we're going to be talking about here before they become relevant. Lastly, I'd just like to talk about demographic changes, and here we have people living longer, they're older, they're wealthier in certain areas, so they're looking for a higher quality type of food, nutrition, and demographic shifts. We've got huge populations moving in from different cultures to different areas to different, and they have a different demand, a different type of food requirement. So these are making huge changes with demographics, those cultural choices specifically. Urban areas, we've seen a massive movement into urban areas, which is now 66% of the population. And just remember, this is a $40 trillion industry, so there's a huge incentive for people to get involved in this industry. I hope that it isn't too much government and too much of the massive corporations that are to take control of all of this, and that there is in fact room for a small farmer and a small producer. Anyway, as usual, you can get some of our previous episodes on johnarthurharris.blogspot.com, and I will see you in the next video.